Mr. Claure, Mr. Fernandez, Trustee Navarro, President Pumariega, Ms. Borrego, Mr. Grande, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, buenos dias.
Good morning.
And it is indeed a beautiful morning here in South Florida. Some of that cool weather continues in April. We love it. This is the Mike Fernandez Global Business Leadership Series at your Miami-Dade College, live from MDC's Idea Center. It's wonderful to have this series back now with physical distancing and an audience via live stream. I'm Juan Mendia, the Director of Communications here at Miami-Dade College. And on behalf of our esteemed President, Madeline Pumariega, who also joins us this morning, and our more than 120,000 students, welcome to this special presentation of Miami-Dade College. This morning, we're extremely proud to present the very latest installment of the acclaimed and popular Mike Fernandez Global Business Leadership Series. Our speaker this morning is Mr. Marcelo Claure, the CEO of SoftBank Group International and COO of SoftBank Group. It was great to meet earlier today and discuss the Data Science for All initiative. We know that that's going to yield a lot of benefits. His presentation today is titled The Entrepreneurial Mindset in a New Normal. He will be formally introduced in just a moment by my colleague, Mr. Gustavo Grande, Director of Programs here at the Idea Center at MDC's Wilson campus, who will also lead today's conversation. It's going to be a good one. I hope everybody's taking notes, not only here, but watching on the stream. Before I continue, however, I once again want to thank the great benefactor and community leader of this series, Mr. Mike Fernandez, who's likely tuning in this morning. Mr. Fernandez is a Miami pillar and a college benefactor whose family named graces our acclaimed School of Business. He is also the generous funder of this series. It's Mike's support over the last 3 years of this series that has allowed us to bring the students and to the community thought leaders, disruptors, and executives from IBM, Pepsi, Boeing, Visa, Microsoft, Facebook, Carnival, SAP, Cisco, Western Union, Amazon, MasterCard, Brightline, American Airlines, and most recently Cisneros. What an impressive list of thought leaders. So thank you, Mike, for everything you're doing. If you're listening, we hope to see you soon. And now it's my tremendous honor to hand things off to Mr. Grande. Gustavo?
Thank you very much, Juan. And good morning, everyone. My name is Gustavo Grande, and I'm happy to have this conversation with Marcelo, and also I'm honored to introduce and follow up with the questions that we have for you today. So Marcelo Claure serves as the CEO of SoftBank Group International, and he's also the COO of SoftBank Group Corp, where he oversees company's strategic direction and its portfolio of operating companies, including WeWork, SB Energy, Fortress, Boston Dynamics, as well as SoftBank's stake in T-Mobile. Claure also spearheads the SoftBank Latin America organization, as well as a newly launched SB Opportunity Fund, and serves as Executive Chairman of WeWork, the world's largest co-working space. He's also a father, a husband, a son, a brother, and we are very happy to have you today. How are you feeling today? Thank you, Marcelo.
Great, and happy to be here, happy to be back in Miami.
Thank you. So for those that are joining us and are hearing from you for the first time, we would like to hear a little bit about your story, your beginnings, your childhood, any memories that you have that made a mark in your evolution and development.
Yeah, so I'm from Bolivia. You know, Bolivia is a small country, South America, and like most Bolivians, or most Latin Americans, we all have an aspiration to eventually make it to Miami, and I was lucky to get to Miami in October 1997, where I came and I started a business. I started a distribution business, a company called Brightstar, which we started with a tiny warehouse in the Doral area, and eventually grew to be the worldwide leader in distribution and supply chain solutions to the wireless industry. The company grew from, I think it was like $500,000 in revenue year one to $11 billion in revenue. It became the world's largest in its industry, and also very importantly, became the largest Hispanic business ever created in the United States. And that was a moment, I think that was a moment of pride for Miami, because it was a Miami-based company. We hired thousands of people in Miami, and we proved to the world that Miami can be a great place to start a business, and Miami can be a great place to serve as a global headquarters, for a company that was number one and still continues to be number one in the world in that specific industry. After that, we had an exit. We sold the company to a Japanese group called SoftBank, and in exchange for me selling the company, I was offered a job to be the CEO of Sprint, and so then I had to leave Miami and go to Kansas City, where with a great team of people, we led the turnaround of Sprint and delivered the best financial results in Sprint's history. After that, we wanted to do a merger, so we merged Sprint with T-Mobile just to go beat AT&T and Verizon, which we enjoy doing that for a long time. We have created one of the world's leading telecommunications companies, which is now called the new T-Mobile. And that gave me a chance to just move from being an entrepreneur who created Brightstar to actually being an operator to run, a 120-year-old iconic Fortune 500 telecommunication company. And that was an important part in my life because at that point in time, there were only 2 Hispanic CEOs leading a Fortune 500 company. It was, I think, Oscar Munoz at United and myself. And the level of responsibility, it was big because we wanted to make sure, hey, Hispanics can also be a public company, large, iconic corporate America CEO. So that was fascinating. And when we undertook the merger, that was a merger that had been tried many times. The government has said no many times. But I think we really had a good cause, and it was an honor to be in 3 congressional hearings, getting grilled by senators and congressmen and congresswomen. And when we were celebrating the merger, we got the notice that the State Attorney General of New York had decided to sue us to stop the merger, which, again, that was another interesting moment because State Attorney Generals usually don't stop mergers. And it was going to be very dangerous for America if you gave the power to an Attorney General to block, because then some Attorney General in South Dakota could wake up and just block a merger. So we decided to fight, and we fought in U.S. court in New York, and we won. And we finally created T-Mobile, which will be, it's an enabler of future because of 5G. Having said that, I met with my boss, Mas, at SoftBank, and he told me that I was a good entrepreneur, I was a good operator, but I didn't know anything about investing, which was true. So he invited me to be the CEO of the international part of the company, but more importantly, to move to Tokyo and to sit with him as we were launching the SoftBank Vision Fund, which for those of you who don't know, the Vision Fund, it is the world's largest technology fund. It is $100 billion. It is larger than all venture capital funds put together in the world. And we did this because the world was undergoing what we think is the most important revolution ever, and that's called the AI revolution. And we started investing in big disruptors that have redefined the way we know the world. We invest in Uber. We're the largest investor in Uber. That basically redefined transportation. We invested in companies like DoorDash that have redefined the way we're ordering our food. We invested in ByteDance or TikTok, which is redefining the way we play, the way we're entertained. We invested in WeWork, which is basically redefining the way people work. And so on. I mean, we invested to a tune of $1 billion a week in these disruptors. And that's, and I will share with you that while I was in Tokyo, my biggest frustration was that I didn't see many Latin American entrepreneurs. What we normally saw were a lot of Chinese entrepreneurs that are changing the world. One thing I forgot to mention, we're the largest shareholders of Alibaba in China. So we saw a lot of incredible Chinese entrepreneurs who were disrupting pretty much everything, right? Because China it's a mobile-first economy where most people saw the internet through their phone and they never used a computer. We saw an incredible amount of Indian entrepreneurs who were replicating Chinese business models into India, and we saw a lot of American entrepreneurs. But never did I see a Latin American entrepreneur. And I was always curious. So after 1 year of learning the investment game, we decided to, I convinced Master to say, hey, I want to test the same concept in Latin America. And we launched the $5 billion Latin American fund to basically replicate what we've done in other parts of the world. And we decided to do this out of Miami. So we opened a team in no time. And that's been my lifetime investor. So I've been privileged to be an entrepreneur, be an operator, and now be an investor. Now the Latin American fund is being run out of Miami, and most of SoftBank U.S. operations, SoftBank Group, now is being run out of Miami. So,
and we're going to go back to that, but I want to go back to the beginning. So Miami College is the largest college in the United States. We graduate the first largest number of Hispanics and the second largest number of Black Americans. And many of them are right now either with ideas or they have their companies or are seeking to start their businesses. So when you go back to your college years and in that moment, that transition between the college years and when you started Brightstar, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in college and at the same time, what was it that sparked that entrepreneurial spirit in you and when you started Brightstar?
Okay, so first I went to a public university. I went to University of Massachusetts at Lowell for about a year, and then I transferred to a private university called, back then was Bentley College, which today is Bentley University, which is basically business. And I think it made us relevant. I mean, I love Bentley because I didn't want to learn about a lot of things that were not necessarily too relevant in what I wanted to do with my life. You know, I knew that business is what I wanted to pursue, and I went to a university that specialized in business and who got rid of a lot of, I'll call them fillers, right? Sometimes colleges make you take a lot of courses that, I don't think they're relevant in the rest of your life. So, as a matter of fact, to be more blunt, they're a waste of the student's life and the student's time. So that was my experience there, and it was business, which is something I really wanted to pursue. Business mixed with computer science, which at the end it proved in helping me start different businesses. My first business was I bought a small cell phone shop in Boston. It was called Cellular Solutions, and the way we disrupted back then, I remember seeing something that said that if you didn't get your pizza delivered in 30 minutes, it was free. That was Domino's Pizza slogan. So we decided to do the same thing. I said, hey, order a cell phone. Back then was the launch of the flip phone, the Motorola flip phone. And if you didn't get it, then we didn't do it in 30 minutes. We said 45 minutes, you would get your cell phone for free. And we took a full-page ad in the Boston Globe. And the phones blew up. We were not ready. We were only 8 people answering the phones. And we were just, I think by 2 p.m. we just disconnected the phones because we just couldn't handle it. And what we did is we positioned 200 drivers with mobile phones in their cars. And we should take an order and deliver mobile phones. And that company grew and it became quite large. It became the largest retailer of mobile phones in the Northeast. And my biggest frustration was that the company grew and we became extremely large. And in my first year, I was able to sell that company and truly, get the American dream. I mean, you work hard and you can progress incredibly fast in the U.S. But my huge frustration was that even though I was probably one of the largest buyers of phones, the distributors were terrible. They could never deliver stuff on time. It was really bad. And my thinking was there were 2 distributors. One was called Brightpoint. The other one was called Cellstar. And my thinking was if they're so bad in the U.S., I can only imagine how bad they're in Latin America. So I figured there was something good to both of them. So I stole the name. Brightstar came from Brightpoint. I took the Bright and the star from Cellstar, and I created Brightstar. And what we did was distribute mobile phones to hundreds of thousands of retailers all over Latin America. And because we had to develop such a good supply chain, we then started running all the supply chain for our customers, for all the telecommunication companies in Latin America. And I remember, when you manage supply chain in Brazil, for example, I remember we had to ship a phone from our distribution center in Sao Paulo and then put it close to a place in the Amazon where then you had to put it into a canoe, into a boat to be delivered somewhere in Manaus or in the Amazons. And it was really complicated logistics. And then living in Miami, I said, God, what we do is hard. I said, we should try to do it in the U.S. where you can just call FedEx and the goods will show up the following day. So we came into the U.S. market, and in no time we became the leaders in the U.S. market. And then we said, if we're good in Latin America, we're good in the U.S., why not create a bigger ambition and become the leader in the world? So I remember sitting in a room this size with my employees, and I said, who's in the mood to move? And raise your hand if you want to move to Australia. And somebody raised their hand. You want to do India, you want to do UK, and then in no time we were in 70 countries. We became the largest distribution company in the world. We became the largest Hispanic company ever made, and we were touching 1 out of every 6 phones that were being distributed around the world. So we had about a 16% market share, which was fascinating. And that's when we started thinking, how can you use data? Back then the word AI didn't exist, but how could you use data and machine learning so we could forecast to a certain level of accuracy what a store is going to need, what phone in when. And we were doing this with 400,000 or 500,000 points of sale around the world. So that's how Brightstar got started. And then I had a chance to meet Masa, who I think is by far the world's best entrepreneur and the world's best investor. And when we just hit it off, and he said, what you've done is pretty incredible. And he says, I want to buy Brightstar from you. And I had no intention of selling it. I was living in Miami. It was all good. We were flying. We were growing billions of dollars every year. And he told me, just let me buy your company. And I was having a hard time understanding why. And he invited me to Sprint. He invited me to be in the board of directors of Sprint. And he told me, look, I want to buy your company, but I really don't care about your company. I said, we have somebody else run it. I want to buy your company so you can go fix Sprint for us. And to me, that was a huge step in my life. I mean, going from a trader of mobile phones, buying cheap and selling more expensive, to running a large telecommunications company. And that was, again, putting an entrepreneur into a highly established, largest employer, and going to Kansas City and learning a consumer business, because the Brightstar was a B2B, a business to business, going to a business to consumer. And that proved to be a really good experience for me.
So tell us about that transition as an entrepreneur, now going into a company that is 120 years old, very traditional, conservative, that was at the brink of bankruptcy.
Yeah.
How was the transition? And then what did you bring from your entrepreneurial experience that you apply into Sprint and to the team?
So it was real fast. I mean, Masa, and as I was speaking to the president, agility is all, right? So, I remember we came to an agreement. We got Goldman Sachs to value Brightstar. He didn't negotiate in the price. He says, add a little so you feel good. He says, when can you start? And I've always loved football. So it was in the middle of the World Cup. So I said, I got to go to Brazil. I got to go to the World Cup. I got to watch a few games. And then I was going to start. I remember I started on August 6th. And I remember that because that's my country's Independence Day. So imagine landing in Kansas City, who the traditional CEOs of Sprint were a little older than me. They all wore suit and ties, and they were, white. And I think it was a shock to the employees of Kansas City. You could read the front page of the Wall Street Journal that says Sprint goes off the beaten path to go find a different type of CEO. And landing there was shocking. I mean, was I want to say a culture shock, because I love that part of the country. I always say that in order for you to understand how great this country is, you got to go to the Midwest, where the values and the foundation of this country are. So it was fascinating to get to meet the people of the Midwest and how kind they are, how hardworking, and how great intentions they have. But you land in a company that was just getting beat every single day, who the employees had lost trust. I always tell them it was like landing to run an NBA team who was last in the standings and who really showed up to practice, but they knew they were not going to win. So therefore, people had lost pride. I remember employees to grab their badges and hide them because they didn't want to go to the supermarket and say, oh God, you're with Sprint, my phone doesn't work, the reception is terrible, and all that. So it was a company that was beat down, and a company that didn't believe in itself, and a company that was lost. And they teach you, this was all new to me, they teach you, as a public company CEO, don't make any changes for 90 days. I said, that sounds good. And then on the third day, I was pulling my hair, and I said, we can't do that. I said, if we're going to do this, we got to fight. And back then, our product was not good, so we said we're going to fight on price. And I remember launching a campaign that was, my first campaign was bring your Verizon and AT&T bill, and we're going to cut it in half. And to show people, we hired people with chainsaws, and people used to show up with their bill, and we used to cut their bill, and we had to convince the agile people of my IT department to build an algorithm that you brought a bill, we scan it, and then Sprint had to print a bill that was exactly half of what you had. And it was easy because Verizon and AT&T have been ripping off people for a long time. So it wasn't that hard to do that. But then we got everybody's attention, and 2 months later, we started actually gaining customers. Right? We kept on losing a lot still, but we were gaining a lot too. So I remember buying t-shirts for everybody that said, look, we're back in the game. And what I did is I started what's called a listening tour. And what I did is I used to go to different cities around the U.S. We used to hire people, say, look, we'll give you $50. We'll give you a free dinner, cheap wine, come sit with us. And they didn't know they were going to meet with me. And I used to ask people, okay, when I think of AT&T, what do you think? When you think of Verizon, when you think of Sprint and all that. And it was tough because they beat us up at a Sprint pretty hard. But more importantly, I wanted to understand from consumers what is it that they wanted. And all consumers wanted is I want a great product at a fair price that I'm not going to get surprised by these bills. Because, carriers were a little crazy. They used to bill you in megabytes, but nobody really could understand what a megabyte was. Like you can measure something by megabyte. How do you measure a megabyte? So everybody got their bill. Nobody could really understand their bill. So we say, what if we gave you a phone that you know how much you were paying for? We gave you an unlimited plan, so you knew what your bill was always going to be the same, and we built a great product. So we worked real hard. We fixed our network, and then we had a great, great plan that was a unlimited plan. But then, there's so much cell phone advertising that every time people turn on their TV and they see a cell phone advertising, your brain shuts down, so you don't pay attention. So even though I had it all great, people were not buying. So I went to my advertising agency and I say, find me the most impactful person in the world that when I put him on TV, everybody's going to listen. And I had choice one was Ellen DeGeneres, who was pretty powerful back then. Yeah. The second was Oprah. And then the third one, as they were showing me pictures, I saw the Verizon Can You Hear Me guy now. I don't know if you remember that guy. And I said, guy, is he available? And they say he's available and he hates Verizon because Verizon had fired him. So I said, we got to go find this guy anywhere in the country. So we actually found the guy. We flew him to Kansas City. And when I told him, I said, look, we're going to go fight Verizon, you could see the joy in his face. And,
he did it for free.
And he was a lot cheaper than Oprah, that's for sure. And I remember it's NBA Finals Game 2, and this guy suddenly shows up. I said, hey, do you remember me? I used to be the Verizon. Can you hear me now? I switch because Sprint is better and it's cheaper, and that day our sales just exploded. Wow. And from that day on forward, we were beating AT&T and Verizon every single quarter, taking their customers. We brought technology to Sprint. We brought a company that could predict why customers were calling our call center and at the same time provide the treatment. So we brought artificial intelligence to our call center. So, I remember visiting a call center and the poor employee in the call center, they used to get beat up by people calling them and they had no idea. There's nothing worse, you're going to get beat up and you have no idea why. So at least now they knew what the customer was calling for because we could predict. Yeah. And then we told them exactly how to take care of that customer. Wow. And then our customer service went up, our employee satisfaction went up through the roof because people like to be part of a winning company. We started generating sales, new customers, and we made money for the first time in the Sprint's history. So it was bringing an entrepreneur to, a super established structure, hard to change company. Yeah. So remind me of universities, and I mean in a good way. But the beautiful thing about big universities or big companies is they're big ships. But once the ship moves, the momentum that ship takes, it's unstoppable. So it was fascinating to fix Sprint. Totally. And it was, the merger was a $200 billion merger. think it's the third or fourth largest merger ever. But it was more fascinating to convince the government to let us do the merger. That's a whole different story.
Tell us about that. What was your thought process, and also how were you feeling in that transition period? Well, let's start with the fact that you and the CEO of T-Mobile also weren't like the best friends at the moment. So how was that process from convincing?
So the CEO of T-Mobile and myself, we were enemies. We used to do world-known fights in Twitter where I called him a con artist and he called me a whole bunch of things. And we used to truly, truly hate each other. But I figured that the only way we could actually be number one and not be number 3 or number 4 was if we combine our companies. So out of the blue, I called him on his cell phone and I said, hey, I have an idea. He said, what do you want? I said, why don't we merge? He says, merge, are you crazy? I said, no. He says, that's been tried before, it never works. I said, well, if we can put your intelligence, my intelligence, your passion, my passion, and more importantly, because of our spectrum positions combined will make us such a powerful company, I say we cannot afford China to beat the U.S. on 5G leadership. And Verizon and AT&T, not only do they not take good care of their customers, but they were not going to invest if we were weak. They were going to invest the minimum necessary to maintain that leadership. So I said, look, if we combine our companies, we combine our investment, we have to go speak to the government and explain that unless we are true players in 5G, China is going to eat our lunch. And a lot of people criticize the Trump administration and all that. For my men, we got an administration that say, wow, what happens if China takes on 5G leadership, right? If it wasn't because of 4G, right, there would be no Facebook, there would be no Google. All these incredible American companies that were made in the U.S. was because the U.S. had 4G leadership, because you need that. I mean, our phones is all we do all day long.
Yeah.
So we went to the government and said, look, I have a solution for China not to beat you. It's allow us to merge. We will write on blood that we're going to lower prices and we're going to build the world's best 5G network. So the government was receptive, but the senators and the Congress people, they wanted to validate that. So they grilled us in many day-long sessions, and at the end, nobody could say no. And then, we explained to the DOJ why this was good, and we explained to the FCC. But it took a long time. It took us about a year. But like anything else in life, we truly understood that what we were doing was going to be good for the country in the long run. And the U.S. political process is broken. I mean, I'm not going to tell you the name of the senator that I met, which he or she was a Democrat. And she says, I love what you're going to do, but I'm a Democrat. I cannot support your merger. I said, but it's good for the country, right? And he or she said, yes, it's great for the country, but I get elected by the union, and there's no way I'm going to let you do that. But at least when I show up to your hearing, I'm going to be nice to you. So that was a victory. So it was fascinating. We got the merger done, and it was
success.
It was fascinating.
Yeah.
It was 1 year of understanding the U.S. political system and getting this merger done. And this merger is going to redefine America. Consumers are going to get lower prices. We're going to be in a competitive advantage versus China. So I think it's good. So to all the great people who approved the merger, I'm incredibly grateful.
And after that, Marcel, once again, present a new challenge or opportunity, which is to learn about investment. How did you face that opportunity? We at the Idea Center call the beginner's mindset, the ability to be humble and understand that we don't know everything, and always that we have the capacity to learn something new every day. So when you were faced with that opportunity, what were the first steps or the first things that you wanted to understand from the investment point of view?
So if it was shocking for me to land in Kansas City, it was more shocking to land in Tokyo, right? So I became the number 2 in the group in a world where Japan is a very close country, where English is not spoken, it's Japanese. And landing there, I remember from the first day going up in the elevator, how organized the Japanese people are, right? I went to the front of the elevator, and it opens in every floor for the first 12 floors. Well, we're a little disorganized as Latinos, so we park there, and every time I get off the elevator, next floor, let everybody get out. And at the end, somebody knocks in the back. I said, wouldn't it make sense that you stand in the back if you're going to go to the top floor? And I said, that you have a really good point. Then my second big problem is that Japanese are incredibly punctual. Incredibly punctual. So, like a good Latino, I showed up 2 minutes late to the first meeting, and the looks that I got from people when I was late, especially my boss, I realized, this is never going to happen. So now I show up 2 minutes earlier to every time I'm in Japan, to every meeting. And, it was fascinating to see the world's best visionary, because Masa, to give you a little story about Masa is Korean, and Korean in Japan is equivalent to Black or Hispanic in the U.S. He built a business from scratch. Masa, back in 2009, was the richest man in the world, as he was the big investor behind every internet company. He holds the Guinness Book of World Records as the only person who's lost $85 billion in one day. So he's the guy who's lost the most amount of money in history. And he rebuilt it, but he's just the ultimate fighter and the ultimate visionary. And he said, look, we lived, and he made that famous investment of $20 million for 30% of Alibaba, and that $20 million is worth $150 billion today, which makes it the best investment ever made in mankind. And when Masa meets an entrepreneur, he's looking whether this entrepreneur can be the next Jack Ma. That's his, and he will not invest in that entrepreneur unless he sees that that person has that ambition, has that intelligence, and has that desire to change the world. And it's a very specific type of entrepreneur, and that entrepreneur is going to know how to use artificial intelligence to utilize it as a competitive advantage. We have a poster and shows companies that use artificial intelligence. It's like a Ferrari. Companies that don't use data to run their business is like a horse. He says the horse can get lucky once every 100 races because the Ferrari might break down and the horse will pass it. But 99 of 100 times, the Ferrari will cream the horse in any race. And that's the thinking. So I'm sitting there, and Masa can make, unlike other traditional established private equity that takes him 3 months to make a decision, entrepreneur comes in, gives a speech, Masa asks 3 questions, and we make an investment decision on the spot. $1 billion, $2 billion, $500 million. At the beginning, I said, oh my God, this is crazy. And it's not, right? I mean, we got, once in a while we make a mistake, but look at all of our companies. We're doing about an IPO a week, and we just invest in companies that are disrupting the way it works. And pretty much everything is up for disruption, right? So you talk about real estate. The WeWork idea was a great vision, badly executed. We'll talk about WeWork, I'm sure, in a second. Yes. But the idea, you are a person who started a company. You got to go get some office space. First, you got to convince the landlord to give you credit. 2, you got to get an architect to do your drawings of your office. Then you got to get a designer to design it. Then you got to call Comcast to get internet, which Comcast is broken, so that's another, that it'll take you a very long time. So you have to get all those things, and it takes you 6 to 9 months. You walk into WeWork, 24 hours, you got your office, you worry about your product, you don't worry about real estate. Brokers, right? The fact that a broker has to take you to a house and you go 6, 7, 8 houses, and the fact that they take 6% for doing nothing, I hope nobody's a broker here, is crazy. So we invested in a company that says, look, pretty simple, utilizing technology, we're going to be able to photograph and video every single house. We're going to utilize technology to tell you which house is your best fit, so you're not there visiting homes every Saturday and Sunday for 3 months. And we're going to utilize technology. That's Compass, and so on. So we look at every single industry, fintechs, right? The fact that you got to go to one of these bank branches to do a transaction and you wait in line, it's just crazy, right? So that's why digital banks today, you can pretty much do anything from your mobile phone. Right. So these entrepreneurs came and basically used to show us how they were disrupting, and we're making those decisions. To me, beginner's mindset was just shut up and just listen, and learn. I was like a sponge, just absorbing. And then Masa is very kind. Said, okay, you take the next meeting. You make the next investment decision. And then it was, hey, we jointly make investment decisions. Maybe jointly is too much. He's the boss. He makes the decision. I support him. But when I opposed, we fought and we debated, and it was great. I mean, the world thought we were crazy. All the traditional venture capitalists who so heavily criticized, SoftBank coming into the venture world was like Uber coming to the taxi drivers. We came in, we disrupted venture capital, we made more investments in 1 year than the last 20 years of venture, and we provided capital to these companies to explode. I mean, the reason why I see Uber, Alibaba, and DoorDash, and so many other companies that today we transact with is because we provided capital to these amazing entrepreneurs who they needed capital to massively grow. And to me, it was incredible to be part of sitting with Masa for 12 hours a day and basically learning the rationale behind making these decisions, that you don't need an army of due diligence people. You bet on great entrepreneurs that are trying to solve a very big problem and that are utilizing artificial intelligence to enable that product to disrupt an industry. Simple as that. If we believe in that, we made an investment.
So you just right now mentioned that sometimes you're opposed to Masa and you will get into a discussion. And I believe that we don't actually have created enough friction in companies. So what's your take in terms of creating a culture where there's friction, where there's dialogue, and with this friction, disagree with curiosity, right? You're actually able to come up with something better. How do you create a culture where friction is okay?
So, it all starts at the top, right? And Masa is one of those leaders who encourage us to basically, obviously with respect, right, to speak our minds out and debate, and Masa changes his mind. Myself in my Latin American funds and the funds that I run today, I want my employees to tell me, why not or why. And we engage in debates, and at the end, people should never get confused. There's one boss who makes the final decision because you need it, but you want everybody's opinion, because the beauty of other people's opinions is they look at the world from a different set of eyes, right? And that's very, very powerful. And a lot of companies they have CEO who makes a decision based on a very narrow view. And that's a mistake. If you have a team of 10 people, it's basically 20 eyes and 10 brains looking at a problem or a situation opportunity, utilizing a different set of lenses. And that's what makes, good decisions. And with Masa, we used to engage, in heated, multi-hour long debates. But one of the things as an organization we learned, the moment we decided to make that decision, we stick to that decision, and we're all aligned to basically execute accordingly.
Awesome. So in your investment career, you have been pioneering the creation of different venture capital funds that support entrepreneurs from specific backgrounds or particular geographic regions. Why do you think this approach is important?
Okay. So first is, what are we trained for, right? When we're sitting in an office and you have a white entrepreneur who's graduated from an Ivy League school and shows you a business plan. Boom. Turn the table. You have an entrepreneur of color who didn't go to an Ivy League, who shows you the exact same business plan. Your brain has been taught to back the Ivy Leaguer. Always. Safe bet. You think they're smarter and all that. But that's not true. It doesn't work that way. And then the poor entrepreneur of color gets turned away, right? So I said, I'm watching TV, and I'm watching the Black Lives Matter movement, and I see what's going on. And my 12-year-old daughter says, "Dad, do you agree with what's going on?" I said, "No, I totally disagree. That is the way justice is served to blacks and Hispanics is not the same. You can see incarceration rates and all those things." So my daughter said, "Look, we have to do something about it." I said, "Okay, 12-year-old." I said, "And what are you going to do about it?" She says, "We should go out and protest." I said, that's all she can do with her time. So I said, great. So she goes, she makes her signs, and we go out and protest. And while I'm protesting, I'm thinking, what an amazing thing that a young person, because she doesn't have money, she doesn't have the means, she doesn't have the voice, she doesn't have their followers to be able to affect change. But her way of affecting change was going out on the street and protesting. So great. So I'm sitting myself and I see on CNN all this, or CNBC, all my colleagues, big investment managers, and they're all saying we stand behind the black community. And I'm telling myself, what does standing mean? I mean, it's some cheap words. And I said, why don't we open a fund dedicated solely to blacks and Hispanics? So I called Masa, Agile Decision Making, 7 p.m. at night, 7 a.m. in Japan. I said, Masa, I want to start a fund for entrepreneurs of color. And Masa says, okay, I explained the situation. I said, look, you're Korean. In Japan, it was hard for you to raise money. I said, I'm Bolivian. It was hell to raise money for me in the U.S. When I started Brightstar, I said, let me do this. He said, you know what, great, do it. I called 2 black friends that I have, and I said, hey, I didn't even ask him. I said, hey, you're going to be in the investment committee with me, Paul Judge and Stacy Brown. And she says, the boss said, great, let's do it. And at 8 a.m. the following morning, we're on CNBC announcing our fund. And it's been probably one of the most fascinating things I've done in my life. We've evaluated 300 companies. We made, I think we're up to, if I'm not mistaken, 15, 16 investments. And these entrepreneurs have nothing less than other entrepreneurs except lack of capital. And they feel so comfortable when they come to a place where they're speaking to a Hispanic entrepreneur that I know exactly what their fears are. And when you have fears, you never fully develop. You're always, hey, if I raise a little money now, I'm going to grow very slow because I'm not sure I can raise the next one. And for them to talk to me, who have experienced, multi-billion-dollar growth, and they feel very comfortable. And we're making one investment a week, and it's going to work out great. And I got something very important for me. So we showed that we were doing this, and then we had the leading companies in the world, Goldman Sachs, PayPal. They all follow with funds for entrepreneurs of color, and it's great because, now they have choices. In the past, entrepreneurs of color had to go beg for money. Now, when they have a great business, I'm not in favor of grants or treating them different. I just want them the same access. Now they have choices. Now I have to go fight. There's a good company. There's other funds fighting for their business, which is great.
Awesome. So I'm going to go to a personal level. Miami College is a change-making institution, which means that we believe that everyone has the capacity to develop or actually activate positive change. But sometimes it's a barrier. There's a barrier because we don't have role models. So who has been a role model for you in order to do what you do in your life? And also, what does it mean to be a role model, Hispanic entrepreneur in the United States and investor now all around the world to many people that are watching you?
So my first role model was my father, because we came from a middle-class family in Bolivia, and every dollar that my father ever saved was to educate his 3 children. And he always had a dream to send us to an American university, and he made lifelong sacrifices in order for us to have a good education. And his thinking was, look, if I just send you money, you're going to spend it. But if I give you good education, you're going to carry that for the rest of your life. So that was very impactful for me, that somebody made so many personal sacrifices in order to save enough money to send his 3 children to the U.S., which, that was his dream, and he was able to execute that dream. Somebody that I truly, truly admire, Steve Jobs, because first, he didn't give a damn about what everybody else thought, and he was single focused on creating the world's best products. And he basically, I think that he's probably one of the most influential forces of all the disruption that we have today, because your iPhone has become has replaced so many devices that we have today. And it's beautiful, and it works right, and it's the most important device. You can forget your wallet, you can forget anything. If you forget your iPhone, that day is going to be a bad day. So I admire Steve, and I admire Masa, I admire my boss, because nobody has a bigger ambition than he does in the world. And the fact that he's willing to take risk every day for the advancement of the world, in which technology is going to solve most of the problems that we face today, those, I would say, those are the people that I have a high sense of admiration. from a Hispanic perspective, is there's nothing more that I want than to be more Hispanic people in the boards of Fortune 100 companies, that there will be more Hispanic CEOs, that will have more Hispanic politicians playing key roles in running, U.S. government, and somehow we've always screwed up for ourselves. I mean, we've made too many mistakes. The growth of the Hispanic population is enormous. I mean, we will represent 1/3 of this country, and the level of representation that we have as Hispanics in comparison to the numbers is we suck. We're terrible. We don't have 1/3 of the politicians in the higher level being Hispanics. We don't have 1/3 of the CEOs. We don't have 1/3 of the board members. And I think we have a lot of work to do. My contribution is, look, if I can get it done, there's nothing special that I have except work hard, have big dreams that I hope other people will replicate, what I'm trying to achieve, so we can get our fair share of everything.
Awesome. So I'm gonna go and see if we have questions from the audience, and that way we can address those questions to you. Let me see. And while I read through the questions, I'm going to ask you about, most recently you announced a $100 million fund for Miami Innovation Initiative. I want to hear your perspective. Why Miami, and why that $100 million fund?
Okay. So Miami it's a lucky moment for Miami that we cannot let it pass. The pandemic, Silicon Valley had a quasi-monopoly of innovation because capital was there, because of great universities that they have, and because you had all entrepreneurs going and building businesses there. So they had the perfect ecosystem. Not necessarily the nicest place to live. San Francisco, taxes in California are extremely high. Politicians are not too welcoming anymore, which I find it mind-blowing. The tech entrepreneurs built San Francisco, and now you have a hostile politicians towards tech, which is insane, right? So suddenly, the perfect storm happens. You have the pandemic, and people have a choice of where they can work for, because every company is closed, every government is closed because of the pandemic, and then suddenly people are given an opportunity to work wherever they want. So people want to work in a place where quality of life is great and where taxes are low. Well, no better city where quality of life is great and where taxes are zero, and that's Miami. So suddenly, people start coming to Miami, and they realize, well, this is not too bad. It's actually great. And suddenly, people who start making a lot of money in New York, hedge funds and others say, New York was too dense. Let's find a place where it's not dense. They come to Miami, and they fall in love with it. So now you have capital, right? You have companies that are moving here. You have employees, tech employees that work in very large companies who are living out of Miami. So you create this small but powerful storm that now is real, right? So now when I see this, I would say the only thing was probably missing is capital to going down to the startup community. Because it's easy to put money into companies that are proven. But where it comes difficult is, how do you help an entrepreneur that has an idea? How do you help an entrepreneur that's in the starting phase? That's high-risk capital. So we figure, in no better way, same thing we did with the Opportunity Fund, is why don't we put some capital, put $100 million to work, so we can go down to something we've never done before, which is invest at a seed level, at a Series A, at a Series B, which is something totally new for us. Yeah. So we launched the Miami Initiative in order for us to do that. And, again, Miami never ceases to amaze me. In no time, we have 600 applications from smaller companies who have some brilliant ideas. And I think in the course of the last 3 months, we've already invested into 3 of them. And our goal would be, for the first 6 months, till we get our people, till we get our systems right, invest in at least 1 company a month. Then I want to get to 2 companies a month. Then I want to get to 3 companies a month. And then I want to get to 4 companies a month, at least once a week. So they will have the capital in order to, to grow their businesses. Then the next thing they need is talent, because right now we have a lot of inflow of talent that's coming from everywhere. But this is where I think institutions like Miami-Dade needs to start needs to continue to educate fine people. But we had an amazing conversation with President of Miami-Dade, in which my belief, and I guess we share the same belief, is we have to start applying data, data science, not to the College of Engineering, but pretty much across the university. Because, like we said before, businesses that use data to make decisions are Ferraris. Businesses that don't use data are horses. And we want to make sure that we want more Ferraris or more cars and less horses. So, I'm truly hopeful, I'm energized after having a conversation of the role that Miami-Dade can play and will play in to make sure that this is, I think this is a non-reversible trend, but we want to make sure that we massively accelerate that trend. That, like those tech companies that grow, we want to make sure that Miami does the same.
Awesome. And we have a couple of minutes for some questions from the audience. One of them from Sherry McLean. Will the World Cup come to Miami? Do you have any participation on that decision?
Well, I think so. As you know, I'm involved in football.
Yes.
I'm one of the managing owners of Inter Miami. I also own a team in Bolivia and a team in Spain. And I love football. I love soccer because soccer is the only sport in the world where the small one can beat the big one. Yeah. Right? And you can have a little country like Uruguay that has 5 or 6 million people will beat a country that has 300 million people. And that's the beauty of the sport. I think the turning point for soccer is 2026 because the World Cup is going to be in the U.S. And I have no doubt that Miami should be one of the cities that is a host city for the World Cup in 2026 because of our demographics. I mean, if there's a place where people love football, it's Miami because of our demographics. So hopefully 2026 will be a year where soccer becomes even more prevalent, not at the youth level, but at the professional level. And I have a lot of faith that will happen.
Awesome. From Richard Chance, we have, being an entrepreneur, I find my curiosity is many times distracting. How do you stay focused, especially with so many decisions that you make every day?
It's good to be distracted. It's good to experiment. You don't want single focus until you have found that winning business. At the beginning, being an entrepreneur is to test different things, to let your mind flow, to figure out how you're going to solve problems and all that. But that mess, so you're only focused when you know you have that winning idea, when you know you have that winning business, then you get rid of the distractions and you're obsessive with that idea and you're obsessive with the company that you're building. But at the beginning, it's perfectly fine. Now, I tell people that there has never, ever in the history of mankind been a better time to be an entrepreneur. Because today we're going to have endless opportunities in which the world is going to be disrupted. So being an entrepreneur, if you ever wanted to be an entrepreneur, regardless of your age, this is the time to be one.
Marcelo, any last thoughts, last comments that you would like to share with our students, with the people from the audience that is watching us from all around the country?
I go back and I say, we are lucky and we're privileged to be living in a time where everything is going to change, right? The timing of innovation and disruption in the past took 10, 20, 100 years, the Industrial Revolution, Agricultural Revolution, even the Internet Revolution. We're going to live, the next 5 years, every single vertical segment, every single thing that we do is going to be completely different. The way we live, the way we work, the way we play. And to be able to live in this moment of change is just fascinating. To me, it's exciting. But that puts a tremendous amount of weight on institutions like Miami-Dade, that you touch so many people, Miami-Dade Community College, that you touch so many people, that even the way we educate is going to be disrupted. So my only message, I urge you to take a look at the future, understand what's going to happen, and teach students according to that. Don't let it come first. You should be able to leapfrog that and be able to produce the best students that are going to be so needed in this new economy.
Marcelo, it has been an honor and a privilege, not only for the college, but also for me personally, to have this conversation with you. Thank you for making the time, and we hope to see you more often here in Miami. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Right on time.
I'll make sure. Thank you very much.